We start here where we are staring down the barrel of stage 8 blackouts, possibly.
Of course, Eskom went on from stage 3 and 4 to stage 6, this within a matter of hours, and South Africans turned to social media to actually vent their frustrations.
Now, Eskom says it needs to shed 6,000 megawatts from the power grid if we hope to prevent a complete blackout of the grid. This has had a detrimental effect on our economy, with businesses losing productivity. Two reporters on the ground for us this morning. The first one is Heidi Giokos. And Heidi, good morning to you. I understand a protest. It must be outside Eskom, I'm sure. It sounds almost like a football game, but it's not. Heidi, what do you have for us?
It's not a football game, Gareth. It's actually quite a different matter to load shedding, and this has got to do with about 300 workers that woke up to the news that they no longer have jobs here at Eskom. These workers are cleaners, gardeners, and a number of other workers that have their contracts have apparently been terminated with immediate effect. So as I mentioned, it's about 300 workers who suddenly found themselves unemployed because of the termination of their contracts, and this is why they've decided to picket outside Megawatt Park. But I think this speaks to the possible financial distress that Eskom finds itself in. The fact that South Africans are subjected to stage 6 load shedding and Eskom is not ruling out the possibility of stage 8 speaks to the seriousness of what's actually going on behind the walls in front of me. That Eskom is obviously not coping with its financial situation, and now also we are subjected to the constant rolling blackouts. South Africans have never experienced this level of load shedding that we have seen in the past 3 to 4 months. September possibly being the worst, but now I think December might be the worst, Gareth. So we will be speaking to NUMSA leadership a little later on when they do arrive here. But workers have, of course, decided to come in as early as possible to express their dissatisfaction with with their contracts being terminated with immediate effect. And if there's anybody that absolutely hates load shedding, it's definitely Heidi Giokos, because it just really brings everything to a halt and brings everything to a complete standstill. And just having driven here to Megawatt Park, most of the traffic lights were out. Luckily, most of the schools are writing exams, so there isn't much of that traffic. But businesses are not coping, hospitals are not coping, and we'll definitely be looking into that aspect and element a little later on. But so far here, you have workers gathered outside wanting answers from Eskom as to why their contracts were terminated.
Yeah, and there's certain areas around the country, but I can only speak, I'm afraid, Heidi, you may agree with me here, that there's certain areas in Johannesburg. I'm going to name them, for example, Rand Park Ridge, North Riding, which we know that once the blackouts have taken place, the power doesn't come back on. I see North Riding was trending again yesterday. I wish I could tell you what the problem is, but I don't think anyone knows. So I think that might be what Heidi's referring to. Let's move across to Aviwe Mtila. He's also watching things for us. Stage 6 rolling blackouts. Aviwe, what are we seeing as far as what you're covering today? Because as Heidi says, there's talk of stage 8. Now, that's never happened before.
Good morning, Gareth, and I am in Cape Town, where I'm actually having a different experience of load shedding this side of the country. One thing that I've noticed, Gareth, is that as I've been driving along, you know, when you're in Johannesburg, you look, for example, basic indicators such as your traffic lights not working, then you know that area is definitely load shedded. I've been driving around from Mowbray, past Clement, past Newlands. I am now in Kenilworth from the office, and all the traffic lights are actually working. So I thought maybe there is no load shedding in this area, but I am actually told, confirmed by one of my colleagues, journalism colleagues here, Samtana Kapa, mentioning that they're actually under load shedding here in parts of Kenilworth. So that's just been mind-boggling for me. And in fact, I'm actually in conversation with the MMC of infrastructure in Cape Town via WhatsApp. This message coming in about a minute ago. So I just want to read some of the measures that they have in place. We do already know that when the country is in stage 6, for example, as we're experiencing now, Cape Town and parts of the Western Cape that are under city power are actually on stage 5. They have, for example, your Steenbros hydropower station that helps them alleviate the burden of load shedding, filling in those areas. So in just these conversations that I'm having with the MMC of Infrastructure, he says that as the provincial government, we've put contingency plans in place months in advance for periods like this. All our provincial facilities have generators to ensure the impact of load shedding on our services is limited. And then in terms of the 24 non-metro municipalities, most of them have generators to ensure water pump facilities, sewage facilities and stations can function. But here's my answer then to the question of the robots and the traffic lights that seemingly are working, and that's that also key robots have been fitted with a power supply unit to ensure limited impact on traffic flow. And that's actually what we're seeing, Gareth. Traffic is flowing, traffic lights are working in Cape Town, as they do say that they have that disaster management plan in place, multi-department, and they're working together to ensure that the burden of load shedding, while the area of Kenilworth, some areas, is under load shedding, traffic lights are working. Such as Newlands, some of the experience that we're having in Cape Town.
And obviously you're based up in Joburg. You've obviously caught a flight and taken a trip down to Cape Town, but you'll know this as well, Aviwe. I'm going to come back to you in a moment. We can talk about this. We've tried this up in Johannesburg, up in Gauteng and other areas. Any of these little power supplies, whether it's solar or backup units, UPSs for the robots in Johannesburg, they get stolen. That seems to be the ongoing issue as far as Gauteng and Johannesburg is concerned. But I'll come back to you down in Cape Town as well. And Heidi, Giokos, let me come back to you again outside Megawatt Park. I know you're covering the story with the workers who've lost their jobs, and we will hear from the unions on that. But remember as well, of course, there was an expectation, wasn't there, Heidi, with a new Eskom board coming in to play, that suddenly the blackouts were going to immediately vanish. Clearly, that hasn't happened. Were the expectations too high, do you think?
I don't think the expectation was too high. I think there's immense pressure for the Eskom board to actually be seen to be doing something, because a month or so later, after they have been appointed, the country's been subjected to stage 6 load shedding. It's not to say, well, it's because there's a new board, they should have come in and sorted out the problems. These problems stem from years of mismanagement, corruption happening at Eskom, and the fact that Eskom does not have money to sustain its diesel bill, that becomes a very big problem. I'm just going to move out of shot so you can continue seeing these visuals while I speak to the issue of the fact that something needs to be done, whether it's the board, whether it's the president, whoever it is. Somebody needs to understand the severity of the load shedding that's currently taking place. This cannot continue. This is not a normal way of life, and it's almost as though South Africans have been told to just accept it. And I've heard numerous leaders saying South Africans just need to be a little bit more patient. How much more patient can you be? It's been 15 years on. Gareth, I quickly just want to add to a point and an element that Aviwe has touched on, where the Western Cape, when the country's on stage 6, the Western Cape doesn't have stage 6 load shedding, and we know that the NNC for Infrastructure and Environment, Michael's son, has been at pains for the city of Johannesburg to have the same kind of experience and not be solely dependent on Eskom for electricity because of this reality. If you have workers that are being dismissed without being informed, as you can see these workers now, what does this say about the actual overall state of our power utility?
Absolutely, Heidi. I think you've nailed it on the head as Heidi gets slightly drowned out by these workers who are now protesting outside Eskom's Megawatt Park. In case you missed what is happening there, some 300 workers at Eskom having lost their jobs. And Aviwe, let me come back to you just briefly as I say goodbye to you as well. And Heidi's quite right. This speaks to the state of Eskom, not even able to keep the lights on. And now, possibly because of what their financials look like, unable to keep some staff employed as well. Yet, you are in a part of the country where the local government has found a solution, but it seems to be the only province that can do it.
The only province indeed that seems to have that solution. In fact, these messages were already filtering in as early as yesterday, trying to alert the media of the plans that they have. This message shared to me by my colleague Aisha Ismail in terms of what Cape Town interventions are when it comes to the stage 6 disaster. Of course, they mentioned that disaster management services, where a multi-departmental plan is in place just to stave away the burden of load shedding. And it is, of course, we do know, as we are on stage 6 nationally, Cape Town itself and parts of the Western Cape are on stage 5. That would be dependent on whether you are in the city of Cape Town's power plan. If you are on Eskom, of course, just like the rest of the country, you will then be on a stage 6, you do understand. But those placed, of course, in plans, we heard even from the MMC in my conversations that I've been having with them now, telling me that they planned for this months ahead. So it's that planning that you're seeing, Gareth. And in my own personal experience of Cape Town, it's just the planning that you see and how well managed the town is, I must say. It's just a breath of difference, you know, when it comes to some of other parts of the country that I've also got to experience. Just how well planned and it is, the town itself. Of course, there would be those concerns around what happens then in the rest of the Western Cape and your townships and the likes.
Aviwe Mtila for us hour down in Cape Town, taking a look at what seems to be almost a different world when it comes to the blackouts and load shedding. And Heidi Giokos said it so nicely as well, that while the rest of us have stage 6 blackouts, it seems to be a very different picture down in Cape Town.